My sister recently brought me this succulent arrangement that she no longer wanted to take care of. This is actually a non-draining pot. I am going to put the elephant bush back inside this because it's one that I think can handle a non-draining pot. Plus, this is fairly small, and if we put a gritty soil mix in here, and if I'm careful with the amount that I water it, it should be okay. I'm gonna pull these sedums out though, as they are not going to do super well here long term. I'll probably plant them on their own and see if I can help them recover. I'm repotting this today in a new potting space that I set up for myself. It is so nice to have a dedicated space just for potting. I want to show you a little bit of what I have in my setup. So first off, I have a bunch of clean Bonsai Jack gritty mix. This is the mix that I tend to use for almost all of my succulents. Sometimes I will mix in a little bit of coconut coir. So I do have a bin of that. This is actually a bin of used coconut coir that I'm recycling. I also keep on hand a bin of old Bonsai Jack gritty mix. So this is stuff that's been in other arrangements I'm confident do not have bugs in them, because you don't want to pass that on to other plants. In addition, I have a bunch of little tools, and these are things that just come in handy from time to time. You can get this set of tools pretty cheap on Amazon. I also have some drainage screens that I'll put in the bottom of pots to cover up the drainage hole so that soil doesn't fall out. And then I have a bunch of pots. In this case, these pots are liners that I use for snappy pots, and they work super well. I love this size. They're a 3-inch square, and they've just worked super well for me. So I like having extra pots on hand. To start, I'm just gonna wiggle these out, and the shape of this is kind of making it difficult for the soil to come out. So I'm not too worried about getting all these roots. Succulents do pretty well without having a lot of roots on them. They can grow from cuttings. So I'm not usually super worried about keeping the roots, but it is nice to have them. Now, one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning, I also like to have just an empty bin on hand that I can use for trash. So all of this stuff, I can brush it off this mat when I'm done, but I like having a bin to put my trash into. That way I don't have to have a big trash can. And if I end up wanting to dig something out of the trash later, it's easier to do that. So I've got a very sad sedum here. I don't know if this is honestly worth saving. I think I'm just gonna toss it. You can see here it has been overwatered at some point in its life. So there's signs of rot right here, this blackening, this kind of dark constricting of the stem, the fact that it's translucent and these leaves are falling off. This is not something in my mind that is worth saving right now. I have plenty of plants and I don't want project plants. But what I could do is I could break off this part that is damaged and toss it. And then I could let this part dry because this part all looks healthy through here. The stem is nice and green. I don't see any black in the stem. So this one could be potted up later. It is a little bit dried up on the top. I could pop that off. Or what I'll actually likely do, these propagate super well from leaves. And so I'll probably set this aside and try propagating it from leaves instead of propagating the cutting. I could technically do both, but I'm going for low maintenance here and avoiding reviving plants because it's just not something that's working for me in this season of life. I want stuff that's ultra low maintenance. This is the other sedum burrito that was in there. And the stem on this one actually looks a lot healthier through here. Interestingly though, I am seeing a little bit of darkening kind of at the top, but I don't know, it's really thin and kind of funky through here. So I think I'm gonna break this part off. And I think this one's good enough. I think I have a little 2-inch pot. I'll try potting it up and see how it goes. I can always toss it later if I decide I don't want to go to the work. Up here at the top, the stem is getting really thin. So you saw I just pulled that leaf off. I'm gonna knock a couple of these off too to save for propagating. And then I'm gonna break off the top right here. And you could do this with scissors too, or or little pruning shears. That is something that's missing from my stash at the moment, so I'll have to bring that in for next time. But this one is good enough. I think I will go ahead and repot it. Now, one of the things I'm noticing most with this, and it's not surprising, is this soil is super compacted. It's very hard, and you can see I'm pushing fairly hard on this and it's just not softening up. So part of that is because I let the soil get bone dry, but part of it is because it's a mostly organic soil mix. These do better if they stay damp, but succulents don't like to stay damp. So that's one of the reasons why a very organic soil mix like this is not ideal for succulents. I'm gonna go ahead and break off as much of that soil as I can, and it does just fall right off. These look good. Again, they are dehydrated. These leaves are super limp, but it should recover pretty well once we pot it up. And then these are already pretty loose. I'm gonna go ahead and, again, just squeeze that soil, try and get off as much of it as possible. That looks pretty good. I don't need to get every single speck of dirt off, but I like to get most of that organic mix off before I repot. All right, I am, like I said, I'm gonna put the elephant bush back into this pot. Today, I'm gonna use the old Bonsai Jack mix to fill up this pot. Now, I'm gonna put soil in the pot about 3/4 of the way up. And then I'm gonna stick those elephant bush stems in. They do have roots on them, so they're not technically cuttings, but I'm just gonna use my finger. You could use a chopstick, I could use one of my little tools, but in this case, actually, you know what? As I do this, I'm realizing I'm gonna do this differently. One of the reasons why I like to have my soil in bins is for this purpose. So I put a little bit of soil in the bottom, but I'm gonna group these little stems together and kind of hold them in place, and then I'm gonna fill in with soil around it. But the nice thing is, if I have it in this bin, all the extra soil just falls into the bin instead of falling onto my table. And the reason I did this is as I started putting those stems in, I felt like they're just not strong enough. It was too hard to get them in place. So this way I could kind of hold them in place, get some soil around them. And now you can see I can move them around a little bit. All right, so I've really overflowed this with soil. And so I'm just gonna press it down, kind of compact it, and then I'm gonna brush off a little bit of the extra. And just kind of tap the side, help that soil settle in a little bit. And voila, we have some elephant bush planted in this cute little bird planter. Now, I'm not going to water this right away. With succulents, I like to wait at least a day. Anytime that you're working with them, it damages the roots and kind of causes some little scrapes and scars. It's totally normal, totally fine for your succulent. I like to let it heal for about a day. That way it doesn't absorb too much water and it's less prone to rot if you leave it dry for about a day and then water. And then I have this little 2-inch liner for a snappy pot that I'm going to plant the remainder of this burrito or burro's tail into. I want to make sure that the stem is down into the soil, but I like having the leaves above the rim of the pot. I don't ever want the leaves like down below the rim. And with this, sometimes I worry that burying the stem too much can cause the stem to rot. Sometimes it can also help it put off more roots. So I'm gonna just put it about halfway in. And then just like I did with the elephant bush, I'm gonna hold it in place and put soil in around it. Just give it a little tap to get the soil to settle in. There we have a cute little sedum burrito or burro's tail that's going to hopefully recover quite nicely in here. Now, the final step for me, anytime I add plants to my collection, is to put them in the Succulent Tracker app. So I'm gonna go ahead and take pictures with the app, add all the information in, and then these will get a spot on my plant shelf under the grow lights. Now, here's the great thing about having this potting table set up. I do have a bit of a mess here. I can absolutely clean it up, and I'll probably brush all of this into my trash bin. But now I can just go put these on my shelves, and then I can replant something else, or I can just leave it and come back later. So I can already tell this is going to be an amazing addition to my office. And it may not be here permanently, but it's going to be here for a while because I have a lot of succulents to repot.